believe in the Monroe Doctrine. I love the Monroe Doctrine. I would die for the Monroe Doctrine. I just haven't the faintest idea what it is. And I think that we have the same kind of thing with some of these documents that are central. We argue about them, but we haven't taken pains to read them, as you heard a very close reading tonight from Dr. Nasr. Many of the contributions of the lines that are printed before you tonight go into the background of what we tend to call the separation of church and state. That's not my own favorite term. It's Jefferson's invention, so we'd better honor it. But I like Madison's word better. We should take care about the line of distinction between religion and the civil authority. That's really what's at issue. And you heard a defense of the integrity of religion along the way, and the real problem is, how does it relate to civil authority, which in a democracy really means also the authority of all the people who are doing the voting and all the courts that are making their decisions. But it took a long time for this to get formulated. The Jeffersonian statement in this statute is not about toleration. Toleration is really easy to come by if you're running the show and you say, all right, I will tolerate you. That's not what happens here at all. It's far more radical. Hannah Arendt, a great student of these things, said, every Christian she knows likes to claim that they invented these freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, so on. But I have to ask them, she said, why did it take you 1,800 years to do it? If it's our invention, something had to happen along the way. Well, from the 4th century till the 18th century, wherever there were Christians who could, they ran the show. And they didn't allow. You get little glimmers in the Act of Toleration, 1688 in England. You get foretastes among religious groups, some of whom were very much on Jefferson's side. The Quakers of Pennsylvania, the Baptists of Rhode Island. You're getting glimmers, but nowhere yet has it been affected civilly the way it was, and that's why the battles in Virginia became so important for the Constitution, the First Amendment, and the legal tradition with which we live ever after. We have to keep that question in mind all the time and not mix things up. If I'm asked about the Christian contribution to this, I'd have to say yes, Christians believe in rights, but they were professing it about the rights of Christians, to be Christian. It's an internal conscience kind of thing. And the rules of the game changed here along the way. So it's not an issue. There's a classic phrase, ignoratio elenchi. That is misplaced categories. Sample. Good morning, he explained. That's not what you're talking about when you say good morning. You don't have to explain anything. If you've seen Basil Fawlty in the movies, his motor car stops, so he goes and grabs a branch and beats it on the head. That's not what's at issue. So in the Jeffersonian thing here, a very different thing was at issue than whether it is Orthodox or unorthodox Christianity or religion. The issue was how we're going to treat them all. In our conversation which will follow, and I have too many notes for the little time we have tonight, I think we're going to be coming to one point where I think Jefferson moves more radically than Professor Nasr's image. And that is, for Jefferson, however much he may have believed in the Creator, he is working here on rights for people who don't believe in the Creator. In fact, one of his very explicit lines is that our Constitution must make room for all the Jews, the Turks, and the infidels. I agree he was not an infidel. He was not a conventional believer, but he was not an infidel. That is, he was not faithless, but he was trying to find a legal tradition that would not make second-class citizens out of them along the way. So some would call him a deist, some would call him a humanist, but what he did, most important, I think, was to face this issue for all. Now, he picked up some interesting alliances along the way. The Anglicans of Virginia, he's fighting. The Presbyterians, it's a little more of a mixed bag, but he's fighting them. He's fighting all of the Orthodox Christians. He isn't even considering Roman Catholicism because that wasn't in the zone of what he would be talking about even. But he picked up allies. Elder John Leland, the Baptist, is my own favorite. to support Jefferson. A big cheese made up in Chester, Connecticut, went from town to town raising funds by coming to see this several hundred-pound cheese to send money because he's for Jefferson. He and Jefferson couldn't have talked anywhere at all about a common creed or a common philosophy, except that this philosophy had to give room for people across the whole zone. And out of this event of 1785 and then 86, you have a virus that spreads, very hard to get there, but finally in the First Amendment of the Constitution, 16 words live on to it. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And in the 1940s, this finally incorporated all the rights from the 14th Amendment after emancipation are now to be extended to all the other federal rights. States cannot violate them along the way. At heart, and this he referred to, is the distinction between persuasion and coercion. And if you read the Jefferson Statute, he very much is convinced that the free mind, the free will, can have no effect at all if you are coerced about important matters. In the court of Constantine, there was a great thinker, the Maverick, the last one I could find for 14 centuries, named Lactantius, who is noticing how the minute the Christians who have been persecuted gain the power, they start persecuting. They pass laws, the anti-freedom of the will, anti-freedom of conscience, all along the way. And he spoke up against that and said, we Christians believe in a God of love. You cannot coerce love. And to invent a God who would coerce or would ask God's people to coerce other people's beliefs leaves you, his word, with a very loathsome image of God. And I think that's really what the Jeffersonian theme is about here too. If you coerce, no matter what measure it is, you're beginning the path along the way of depriving. Now, this didn't settle everything, and doesn't settle everything. I don't know anything that's more controversial in the Supreme Court every year than the decisions affecting the line of distinction between religion and the civil authority. If you want to really get the citizenry riled up, you'll really get them riled up. I thought of something that might help break into our conversations. I was listening to this eloquent description of Jefferson's view of Creator and so on, that the radical right that would like to make this into a Christian America is somehow closer to some of what we heard than others, and they are creating a picture of Islam in which is destructive of this. As you're getting a real defense here of the role, not coercive, but the positive view of religion along the way. I wonder how often that is seen or heard on cable television or talkback radio or whatever. And why does that voice get heard instead of, in my view, the most distinguished American Muslim philosopher on these subjects? Agree with him or not, he certainly presented a view of this, which shows how much is at stake. And again, I would say, remember, in 18th century language, the Turk was the Muslim. Jews, Turks, and infidels were supposed to be left out. Jefferson was not interested in just including the Baptists and all the Christian sects, as he called them. It had to include them all along the way. Where does it leave us? In my own view, what Lactantius wanted and what Jefferson did has given us a great charter that is very difficult with which to live. I think that the category of responsibility brought in by Dr. Nasr, which is one of his favorites, I recommend his books on this, is extremely important. But you'll have to ask in this Jeffersonian line, responsibility not only for what, but to what or to whom along the way. Yes, responsibility to your own conscience, but how is it formed? Yes, responsibility to your own God, but what if your God's vision contradicts the